introduction to a book called, it's a Chinese book, translated into German and then into English by Richard Wilhelm, who did the first translation of the I Ching that was available, and it's called The Secret of the Golden Flower. But he didn't go into it enough. The golden flower was actually the golden embryo. It's the same word as in Sanskrit, Hiranyagarbha. Hiranya is gold, and Garbha is womb, or egg, or embryo. And so it was the golden embryo, and that was the golden flower. And this was the golden embryo inside each person's brain, which could be released, because the brain is the womb of the higher kind of vehicle that is possible after death. Now you might say, well, what happens if a person doesn't do this process and dies? They all die. Yeah, sure they do. They're held over. It's much more complex than a caterpillar and butterfly. That's a rough analogy. The human being is much more complex. So they're held over in a kind of a caterpillar state. And then they're recycled. But unless this process starts, they can't navigate. And it's nothing like a penalty. It's just that you're not equipped. You can't experience a world till you have the proper eyes to see it. And so this higher process grows the kind of embryo, it's the only really analogy we have, that can cope with a world far beyond this in richness and experience. And if you're not equipped with that kind of body, you have to use this kind of body again and come back to a three-dimensional world. And that's fine. And everybody can go at their own speed. There's nothing forcing here. This is biology we're talking about here. Actual suprabiology. So we needn't achieve our destiny if we don't want it that fast. Human beings can take as much time as they want. So the lion path is simply based on the 3 couches in Tutankhamun's tomb. That was a very important tomb, thank you, because it preserved these 3 couches. Every person when in death was called an Osiris, because Osiris died and then became transformed into Horus. And it was very interesting because after Osiris was dead, Isis, by magical process, got herself impregnated by Osiris, and Horus was born. So it was really Osiris getting reborn again through Isis. She provided the means to make the higher body. So we often see the mummy wrapped up was a chrysalis. And we often see a hawk head on the mummy, showing it's turning into something with wings. So it was a definite idea of a chrysalis turning into something, which winged meant able to traverse more dimensions. A caterpillar is effectively one-dimensional, crawls along branches, just lines. And it goes from 1 dimension into 3. Because as a winged creature, it can go anywhere it wants in 3 dimensions. So this was the idea, and Egypt preserved it. Then they also preserved an idea of cosmic powers coming in at certain times. Well, we all know this through spring, fall, winter. Nature changes, very much so. Even at the North Pole, we have our 6 months summer, 6 months winter, and the sunspots are not the same. Every sunspot cycle, they reverse polarity. And the magnetic field of the sun switches. So the sunspot cycle is 11 years long, you're told, but actually it's 22 years. To get back to the same polarity is a 22-year cycle. So all these things go in cycles. So it shouldn't be surprising that the regenerative forces come in cycles. Have any of you read Sir Rider Haggard's novel called She? Anyway, it was made into a movie. There was a kind of a fire which killed people. It was an ordinary fire, but every once in a while it would turn blue. And if you walked into this blue flame, you could preserve youth. It was the symbol of the immortalizing process. And she did it. And this was very, very, very interesting, because at certain times, this ordinary influence turns into something else. And at those times, we can receive it. Now, if we have, it's like coming to a fountain that flows only at certain intervals. If you came without any receptacle, if you weren't open, had nothing to hold the water in, it wouldn't do you any good. If you came with something to hold the water with your cup. And the fountain wasn't flowing, it wouldn't do any good. So you have to open the brain, stimulate it by certain meditative practices, and then at certain times you have to do this so that you are in alignment with these time powers that come through at that time. And that's really the case. There was a fellow in France who started the Lion Path, and he had forgotten about the time shift in France. And it didn't happen. And he waited. Normally, he goes into an altered state within 1 hour. And it didn't happen. So it happened only when the timing was right. So it showed him the importance of these time forces. There are real forces that work through time. Time is energy. So we align ourselves with these at certain times, and we resonate with them. And it's like a swing. If it swings back, you just need a little finger to touch it, and it swings more. You don't need much if you hit it at the right time. If you hit it at the wrong time, it shudders and comes to a stop. So it's hitting these things at the right time. Yes?
You just said that time is energy, and earlier you were talking about how time is not necessarily a dimension, but relates to dimension.
That's right. It's beyond space, because space is a field in which time can work. All energy has to be released through time, because it acts. Let's put it this way. If you have a point of space, it's a very tiny thing, as we were saying. A point is a point is a point. But what is a point of time? A point of time is a moment. You can consider time as a vast line with past, present, and future, but it's not like any line you've ever seen in space, because the points on that line are moments. And in one moment, the whole universe of space is held. At this moment, the whole galaxies are held in this moment. Everywhere. So all of space is contained in a moment of time. In any dimension, however high. That moment is a very big point. So this shows you how necessary time is for the release of energy, because if you only are in a time point, and that can't go to the next moment, there would be no movement and no energy release. So time is the source of the whole thing. Now, so we resonate, to make a long story short, we resonate at these time intervals. And then it swings more and more and more, and we resonate these neurons into action. We resonate our own metamorphic process. And this is not anything unnatural. It's the most natural thing for a caterpillar to become a butterfly. If it doesn't, something's wrong. A gland is tied off. So we change. But we change in subtle ways, because it's not a physical transformation as it is with the caterpillar. It's a consciousness transformation. So we gain new abilities, new perceptions, new insights. And around us, people may not notice any difference, except that maybe we're nicer or we're easier to get along with. And that's good, because you should be able to be in the highest state of consciousness and still be able to talk to the delivery man in such a way that he's not repelled. And this is the whole way of doing that, because it becomes very natural. So then finally, if you continue these resonant exercises, it lasts about 5 years, because it is a slow process. And in fact, we now know that it lasts almost 9 years, because there are 27 normal sessions, so to speak, and then there are postgraduate sessions. There are about 9 of them. So it's a 9-year program, really, 8 plus. And it takes a certain amount of self-discipline and a certain amount of direction. But self-discipline isn't the right word, because if you're interested in something, there's no discipline about it. You just want to do it. So it depends how interested one is in gaining a new grasp on life. I think now, perhaps, it's more appropriate to talk like this, because the world is in such a mess that everybody sees something has to be done. Before, it was only maybe the few, and you'd say, well, that was for those who want to be geniuses or something. It isn't a matter of being a genius. It's a matter of being able to cope with this whole shift that we're going through in time. And the world is going to go on its own way, and we have to go on our way, and we have to outstrip it. Or otherwise, we're on a collision course with pollution, with overpopulation, with paranoids running the world. The schizophrenics are in the asylums, but the paranoids are in the political places of power. And the paranoid is a person who achieves their delusion.
That's right.
The poor schizophrenic, can't do that. You say to a paranoid, well, that can't be true. You say, because 6 other people saw something else yesterday. He said, oh, but they're dead. They're already dead. They were arrested last night. So the paranoid are